actually, you can see a parallel here between, because I mentioned sort of drugs there. Look at 60s drug culture, and you've got Timothy Leary, who is a pretty colourful character, and he was given to saying that there should be a fundamental right to be able to control your own consciousness. Now that sounded a pretty wacky idea to conservative people in the 60s, because the kind of consciousness manipulation that was being talked about was very hard to control. But if you've got fine-tuned control over your own sensorium, then suddenly that same freedom, what we're really talking about is what Max Moore referred to as morphological freedom. The ability to choose your own form, essentially, and that includes your perceptual parameters. And another thing is you can carefully map between objective reality and sensory preferences. So just because you choose to have a tailored sensorium doesn't mean you've got a complete divorce from reality. You could have warnings pop up, guidelines, things that say, are you sure you're not missing something vital in your sensory impressions, like the traffic and the road. So all that stuff, that's fairly basic. So that's you've got enhanced perceptions. Fair enough. Okay, you've got a whole bunch of weird and wonderful menu with all sorts of weird and wonderful sensory options to choose from. But there are actually some interesting, deeper implications that start to creep out. So this is the weird and wonderful middle part. I'm just going to talk briefly about the Anthropic principle. Bear with me, you'll see this going. So there's the Anthropic principle, just in case you don't know. Carter in 1973, it's a principle based on the observation that if you look at any aspect of the universe at large that you care to measure, the measurements always come up as being exactly what humans require in order to exist. Now, a few quick examples so you see what I'm getting at. It turns out that to one order of magnitude, the universe is exactly the right age and has just the right amount of matter for humans to be able to exist. So if there were any less matter, you would have a big crunch. If the universe were one order of magnitude older or younger, then the right amount and the right kinds of matter wouldn't have formed or would have already disappeared. The kind of things that support human life. Similarly, the cosmological constants, just the right value. And the fundamental physical constants are balanced exactly the way required to have allow the formation of matter as we understand it. Now that, the more you look into it, there are all these crazy things you could call coincidences, but then, quite often people start reading into this stuff and then they say, well, first interpretations, there are weak and strong interpretations of the situation. Weak interpretations to say, well, okay, so there are parts of space-time that are hospitable to humans, like the time and place we exist now. There are parts of space-time that aren't hospitable, like the early and very late universe. So it's not surprising that we find ourselves existing where we do. The strong form of the Anthropic principle is saying that the whole universe pretty much is set up, its parameters are set up so as to guarantee that a sentient observer will exist at some point during the lifetime of the universe. And there are other interpretations of the Anthropic principle that I don't have time to go into now, but these are ideas like there are multiple universes. Some of the vast majority of them would be inhospitable to human life, and we just happen to be existing in the one that is hospitable, or one of the few that's hospitable. Or simulation theory, that this is all just a big vast simulation put on for our benefit, and so it's not surprising that it's one that hosts us nicely. But as I was about to say a moment ago, people generally don't take long to get to a point where they say, well, of course the universe is going to look exactly the way it needs to look for us to be alive. Otherwise we wouldn't be alive to see it at all. It's a tautology. Now I'll just quickly say that, sure, it might be a tautology, but that doesn't write it off as uninteresting, because if it is, then you have to accept at least one of these three corollaries. So, one, that sentient observers could and would exist in a universe radically different to our own. Two, that the presence of sentient observers isn't special in any way whatsoever. So a universe that not only doesn't but couldn't support life would be just as remarkable as the one we exist in. Or three, that life is in some way valuable and it requires recognisable to us conditions to exist, and therefore the universe we're living in represents some extraordinary statistical likelihood. And so it is kind of remarkable that we're in the universe we're in. Now, this is where we start to get back to perception a little bit. So, Nick Bostrom, and among others, have pointed out this might be a case of anthropic bias. So it could be that, you know, we're seeing the universe a particular way because of who we are. And now this is something I'm saying here. So it could be that our observable universe could be part of a larger, stranger space that simultaneously manifests a much wider range of values than those observed. So we're only seeing part of the picture. Even more radically, it might manifest every possible value for every possible variable simultaneously. So it's what physicists would call a phase space. So basically just this mad system, that's got every possible permutation of physical existence. Some subset of that, a very small subset of that, could theoretically support human existence or sentient existence. And a subset of that we can actually observe. So, if there is this metaverse outside of our observed universe, I mean, in what sense could that be real, if it's incompatible with our existence? Well, as I just described, you could have a situation where you've got an observable universe, a deep metaverse, which is not real to us because we can't exist in it. But then there's a penumbra, sort of a middle zone, a shadow, where these phenomena are real, but they're imperceptible to us. You might say, oh, you know, what kind of mysterious things are these? Well, we've already seen plenty of them out in space, and we conjecture things like dark matter that we presume should exist in order to explain our observations, but we can't perceive them directly. And much closer to home, you've got things like the patterns, the ultraviolet patterns, spectrum patterns that butterflies can see and that humans can't. Humans don't have a wide view of reality. We've got a pretty narrow band of what we can see. So just to tie this bit up and then begin concluding and going back into perception. So if you've got these three zones, and we're sort of getting, this is a sort of deeper speculation, what would it mean to travel from the observable universe, and I use travel in the broader sense, from the observable universe we're in, into the penumbra? Would anyone like to hazard a guess? What would that mean? Very quickly. Any guesses? No, great. Okay. Oh yeah, please. Nice one. That's exactly it. All you're doing is changing your perceptual set. Now, I'm quite glad someone answered that because otherwise there's no way you're going to get the next one. So what would it mean to travel from one of those zones out into this deeper hypothetical metaverse? Now, Anthropic actually talked about this very, very briefly at the end of his book Robot in 1999, where he pretty much said, well, imagine you've got alternative universes, which is just another way of phrasing this metaverse idea. And some of them might be geared to have slightly different light speeds to ours. So you would basically you manage to engineer yourself a body that exists could only be compatible with physical circumstances that exist in that other universe and not in ours, and then you might find yourself there. Now that's radically speculative. But there is this idea then that all of this brings up that there's actually a threshold, a perceptual threshold, things that posthumans can perceive. So we bring it right back from the speculative edge. Things that posthumans could perceive, in principle, that unmodified humans can't, just as a simple matter of physiology. So we're talking about the possibility of a fundamental threshold between qualitatively different modes of perception, human and posthuman. And these could be pretty radical things. So, tying up now, the idea of future shock, which Max brought up this morning in conjunction with singularities. Which is what I want to say here. We're talking about a perceptual threshold impassable to unmodified humans. Now, I probably wouldn't have brought it up at all. I wouldn't have talked about it today, except that sounds a little familiar. What is this perceptual threshold that unmodified humans can't get past, but posthumans can? Oh yes, it's called an event horizon, singularitarian speak. Now I'm not saying that you need to subscribe to views that a singularity is likely or even possible in order to think about